Welcome to Disorganized Life. If you're a mom, wife, or coffee lover seeking advice on how to reduce clutter and reclaim time, look no further than your host, Laurie, founder of Simply Be Organized and author of Hot Mess, a practical guide to getting organized. For a lot of people, clutter is their dirty little secret, but it doesn't have to be. Each week, we will share practical tips, chat with experts, and provide strategies on how to keep you organized. I hope that by sharing our stories, you feel a little less alone and more empowered to tackle the areas that are holding you back. So let's get started.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of This Organized Life podcast. I'm your host, Laurie. I'm super happy that you are joining us today. I'm really excited because if you're new to our show, we're going to be kicking off, or in 2022, I'm going to be doing this partner spotlight feature. And if you haven't heard our partners before, we have a group of organizers that are spread out all over really the globe, because we have international partners as well, but the majority of them are in the US. And they all own and operate their own independent companies, their own professional organizing companies, but we do support one another. We do community team building things, and it's a great referral network. So if people come to us and they're looking for support in a specific city or town, we have this curated network of professionals. And so one of the things that I love to do is help promote our partners and learn from them. So joining me today is one of our partners in Illinois, and her name is Lynn O'Meara, and I'm going to bring her out in a minute, but just a little bit about Lynn. She is somebody who's always loved organizing. It's something that's kind of been a passion of hers. And a couple of years ago, she decided that she was going to turn it into a business, which is organically the way so many people in this industry have started. And I don't think I can say that enough for people, because I want to give people opportunities and see how they can actually turn their passion into a profession. And Lynn is one of those people that has definitely done that. And then the other thing is she's mom. And so she knows all about juggling what home and work and stuff. And she spent a lot of time looking at the impact of how clutter affects people in their family and in their lives. And, what's the why behind having an organized space, not just the how to, but really why it's important. And that's one of the things that I love about it. So again, I don't want to hold out any further. I'm going to invite Lynn out to the show. We're going to have a nice conversation, and she's going to tell us a little bit about herself and what she does. So without further ado, please welcome my SBO partner, Lynn O'Meara, to the show. Welcome, Lynn.
Hi, Laurie. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, I am very excited to have you here. It's been a long time. I feel like we've been planning it, and now it's finally here, and I'm super happy. So I gave a really, really top line overview to our listeners about you, but in your own words, tell us a little bit about who you are, what you did before you started your business, and a little bit about your business for all of our local people to you.
Okay, great. So as you mentioned, I have my own organizing business. I'm actually in a suburb outside of Chicago. I live here with my family. I have 3 children. I have a girl that's a freshman in college, and then a boy that's a sophomore, and then a younger one that's in 7th grade. What I did before that, I guess in my other life, is I did a variety of different sales jobs, inside sales, outside sales. What I ended up finally doing was becoming a sales trainer at a company. We're going way back in time, MCI WorldCom Conferencing. So that was back in the day where to actually have a conference call, you had to call into a call center, and they all kind of connected you. And that was how you had a conference call.
I remember that. I totally remember that because I was a recruiter, and I remember that. So as soon as you said, I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yes. So, I became a sales trainer there, and that I think was really a good fit for my skills that I had, automatic. One of the things that I had to do for the sales training is because the company was based in Chicago. When they hired new new salespeople, which was all over the country. They all came to Chicago for new hire training that lasted about a week. And I basically planned that from, telling them how to get here, who the speakers were going to be, what I was going to speak at the meeting, as well as planning the hotels and what they were going to eat. And basically from start to finish, I did that. And I remember sitting with my boss and we were going through a review and she's like, you did everything great. She's like, one thing that I have to say I would give you a perfect score on is your organization between planning the meals and the transitions and how everything flowed. She's like, I don't think I've ever given anyone a perfect score in that area. So
that was foreshadowing. That was like foreshadowing for your future.
Absolutely. So fast forward, I decided to take a break when I had children, and I'm getting to a point, and they're getting to a point where they no longer needed me as much because they're not the itty bitties. And I remember talking to a friend of mine and she's like, what do you want to do? And I'm like, I don't know. She's like, come on, there's something that you like to do or you want to do. I go, you're going to think I'm crazy, but I think I want to be like an organizer. And she was like, oh my God, that is perfect for you. You have to go, you have to do it. You have to do it. And so I decided to do it. And here I am.
That's amazing. And tell everyone the name of your company, because I don't think we mentioned.
Oh, yes. Yes. Okay. So it's LM Organizing. And just a little bit reason why I did that is because my initials are L, Lynn, M for Margaret, and then O, O'Meara. So LM Organizing is just a little play on my initials.
Oh, I like that. See, I was today years old when I learned that. I did not know that. Oh, I love that. That's great. And of course, we'll link up to this in our show notes. So if anybody is, local to your area, and I think that's one of the things that one of the reasons why we want to have this partner spotlights is, we want people to get to know the organizers in our group. Like I talk a lot about, we have this amazing group and we have, I have this crazy network of, organizers all over the place, but I want people to really get to know our organizers so that they feel like they have a connection to them. That way, if you or your mother, sister, cousin, brother, whatever is looking for somebody, you can be like, oh yes, I feel like I know her. And so, so that's a big part of why we're doing this. One of the things that I wanted to talk, you and I have talked quite a bit offline about clutter, and not just about the aesthetic part of organization, but really about the ripple effect, if you will, of clutter in families. And when we were talking offline about what topic do you want to talk about, what do you think that, what special thing do you want to share with our community? That was one of the things that you wanted to talk about. So I was hoping that you could just kind of elaborate a little bit about that and maybe why that's important to you. And we can just kind of go from there.
No, absolutely. So one of the reasons why I think I enjoy organizing so much, and I think as all organizers, is I enjoy helping people. And one of the things that we talked about is I have family members that struggle with being organized just from day to day, as well as being able to let go of clutter. As we all know, if you have a cluttered space, whether it be your office or your closet or, your pantry, there's usually a reason why you don't want to address that. So it's just good to talk to people and find out the reasons why. For example, I think it's hard when someone's trying to downsize and they need to go into a space that's a lot smaller than what they're currently in. They've been in a home for 30 plus years and they've never really had a chance to, either it might be because they didn't want to, or they just didn't have the time to go through items. So eventually, as a family member, you might have to help your parents make that transition, and they might not want to let go of all their items. There's sometimes they say, and it depends on the generation. For example, my grandmother, she grew up in the Depression. So their mentality was, you need to save everything because you will find a reason for it, whether it be a newspaper or whether it be magazines. Magazines was her big thing. She's like, there might be a use for that one day. So to have to deal with that and not become frustrated with someone that won't let things go. You have to make sure you understand all different aspects of that. You have to understand where that's coming from. It's not someone's doing it to be difficult and to be frustrating. They really believe that. So you have to make sure you help them get to that goal, because they're not going to be able to take all those things, but also understand the other family member who needs to get them out by a certain amount of time. And there's a timeline and they need to stick to it. So I'm able to see all different sides of that. And I feel that that really helps me understand how people are feeling when they come in, when then they let you come into your home. I mean, that's a very personal and very scary thing to have to come in and let someone look at their, maybe it's what they've been trying to get to, and it's just, they don't know where to start.
It's a very vulnerable position.
Exactly. Yes.
And I always say that too. And thank you for sharing that, because I think, again, we talk a lot about the end result that we see, this really, pretty cabinet or pantry or closet or whatever. But we really, for so many people, there is that very big, strong emotional component. And when you talk about people's, I don't want to say agenda, because agenda just has such a negative connotation.
Right.
Like using your example about somebody who's trying to help their parent downsize, right? So you're like you said, we have a timeline. You as the helper are probably busy with your own stuff. So you're already taxed, because now this is adding something else onto your to-do list, and you just want to get it done from a very tactical perspective. But the person that has either not dealt with it or is, again, coming from a different mindset, is going through a different process than you. So what are some of the things that you've done that you can maybe share with people that are listening that go, I can relate. I'm going through this right now. I'm trying to help my parents or my in-laws or whatever go through this, and I feel like we're at an impasse. Is there anything that you can suggest to our listeners out there?
Yes. So one thing I always try to do, and again, it depends on the situation, but I find it helps if they're needing to discard items, as I like to say, I like to give them places where it's going to. For example, if it's clothing, I can say, there's this great local, it's in not too far from it's Wings program, and all the items that are donated help women and children who are victims of domestic violence find places to live. So I feel like if I can tell them a reason to give away those items to someone else less fortunate. Another example is books, because people love their books. There's another great organization that's local that takes children's books, and they make sure that every child has a bag of books to last them throughout the year. So I find if you do it that way, they might be more willing to let it go versus just saying, I'm going to take your stuff. Don't worry about it. I'll take care of it.
It's so true. And my very good friend, Jen, who's going through this with her in-laws right now, and they've had to downsize from their house that they raised their kids in. They lived in for 40 years down to an apartment. Now they're moving into like an assisted living. So they've been through this process, and her in-laws are, again, very reluctant to get rid of all these things. And one of the things, and I gave her that similar thing, as I said, give them some concrete places. And when they did that specifically, it really did flip that switch for her father-in-law specifically, who was really struggling with parting with stuff, knowing that it was going to a place that was important to him. There was a organization or a family or a charity or whatever that that allowed him that permission to get rid of it. And so or let it go rather.
Yes. Yes.
And so I've seen it firsthand happen. And I've, and again, I don't want to say like everyday people, like my friend Jen isn't a trained professional. She's not a professional organizer. She's not even overly organized herself, but she used that, sorry, Jen, I love you, but you know what I mean? So, but just using this, you don't have, it's not like, oh, you don't do this for a living, so you can't impart
Exactly.
some of this stuff. And I think that that's really, really helpful to people. So some of the other things that you see, I mean, what about in your family? Because, you've got people that have that aging, downsizing, but then you've got people that are just living their life,
Right.
and how clutter can impact a family, with kids, whether they're littles, middles, bigs. Can you just speak into that a little bit about how your business has, what you've seen and observed?
Sure. So with my kids, something that I do and I try to help with my clients too is that if they purchase something new, that they have to give one thing away. So for example, if they purchase 2 new books, they have to find another place for 2 more books. Same with t-shirts. I try to do that as we change seasons. I'll have them go through their drawers and find out what fits, what doesn't fit, and then decide, okay, how many do we really need? And then talk to them about where are we going to donate these items. Because like I said, I feel if their drawers are overstuffed with clothing, they can't find anything. And they end up wearing the same thing over and over again. So if you can have it nicely laid out and they're part of the process, then they understand what all goes into it and that you need to do this so you won't have all these things that you don't even use or know. And that will help them hopefully throughout their whole life.
How old were your kids when you started? And I agree, of course. So yes. How old were your kids when you started getting them involved in the process?
Oh my gosh. As probably as young as when they were able to make the decision of what toys or books they wanted and didn't want. I mean, I always tried after Christmas, especially when they were younger, that we would lay out all our new toys and then we'd say, okay, we need to decide what toys we're going to get rid of. Part of because we didn't have the space, so that makes it a little bit easier because I'm like, this is flowing out of the closet. We can't have this. I can't have this. It's like making me crazy. So yeah, I'm trying to think as they all along, because that's kind of how, how I work. And
Right.
I wanted them to be part of the process.
Yeah, no, I think for a lot of people, it's really, it just seems it seems like a very black and white thing, right? Like, oh my gosh, the one in, one out. And you hear that. But for me, I always try to approach it as it's just a choice. It's what are you, it's, you have a choice. You have a choice of, and I'll say this to my clients too. If you're looking, you have a choice of your space. You only have so much space. You can only maximize it so much. So if you are choosing your stuff over your space, then you might not have that aesthetic that you want. Or if you're choosing your stuff over this, you might continue to have anxiety or frustration. So again, it all comes down to wanting people to feel like they're in control. I think for me, and I don't know if you agree with this, but just like a lot of people say, I like to organize because it gives me a sense of control. I feel like having the decision to say, I'm deciding what stays and what goes gives people that sense of control. And the younger you can impart that on people, the easier it becomes because they don't feel like they're necessarily having stuff taken away from them.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And I think to go back to how family clutter affects the whole family is you can't go in there and say, okay, we're just getting rid of this. Or, or you can't like go in and I don't want to say secretly, but yeah, it's basically you go in and you just take all their stuff away. I mean, that is what you want to do. But I think you've probably found it. I know I found it. If you do that, it just makes the process so much more difficult because they're already mad at you. And then, they want to be stubborn and not, they don't want to do it. So you have to be really careful. And I agree. If you let them feel like they're in control, which they are,
sure,
it makes the process so much easier for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to take a quick break and then I want to come back and I want to continue the conversation. And I want to talk about like what it's like when you, have spouses that are not necessarily on the same page, because I know that that's a big thing. It's different when it's that parent-child dynamic, but when you start talking about spouses. So sit tight, we're going to be right back, and we're going to continue our conversation with my partner, Lynn O'Meara. All right, Lynn. So we're talking all about family clutter, what that looks like, and how to get everybody on the same page. And when you're talking about different people, it's like you have different personalities. People are prioritizing differently. People see the world through different lenses. I'm sure you've seen this with your clients, maybe even in your own personal life, where you have two spouses, or even if it's two roommates, but two peers, I'll say, that are not, that approach clutter differently. What's your advice there, or any thoughts, comments on that?
Yes, well, that's a great question. And I'm sure, as you know, that's probably typically what the case is. There's one partner that perhaps is a little bit more organized or has a different view of what organization should look like versus the other. What I try to do is I will talk to the person that I'm working with, that's my client, and just get a little background on what makes that person work. Both of them, obviously, and then talk about what maybe the client has tried. For example, if there's an office that the person files and piles, as I like to say, but yet knows where everything is, it's pretty amazing, because I do not work that way, but I know that there's people that they know exactly. If you ask them, I need to find the title for the car that we bought 10 years ago, there's a pile, and they know exactly where it is. So in their mind, that's organization, but it's really not. So what I try to do is I try to say, what do you think would work? For example, the piles with files, maybe just put them so they're actually in piles, maybe to start with. And then maybe take one pile and say, could we have them go through this and maybe just sort it by, these are bills that need to be paid. These are bills that might be able to be shredded, or magazines, go through magazines, newspapers, and just start from there and then see how it goes. Because as you know, you could have all the best intentions and say, oh, this has worked before, it's been great, we'll do this. And then you get down to it and you have to switch gears, because each person is different. And that's part of the process.
No, absolutely. And I think one of the biggest challenging things is, especially when you're talking about people where it's not a parent-child, where the parent is telling a young child, I'm talking about, not a parent-child with an aging parent, but where you're not telling people what to do when you're in a position of authority. But when you have peers, if something's not a pain point for somebody, there's really not a huge incentive for them to want to change with anything. I mean, It could be exercise, losing weight, stopping drinking, getting on a budget, fill in the blank. If something's not bothering you, you've less of a reason that you're going to want to make any type of a behavioral change, because that's really what we're talking about. We're talking about saying, this was our habit. This is the way that we did things, and it's not working anymore. And in that person's mind, it might be working. And so I know for me, it's having that communication piece of recognizing why that is, or how that's negatively impacting their partner, right? Because I've had this, I call it the clutter blind people, where they can just walk past it. And whether that's the sink, whether that's the pile of papers, the sink of dishes, the laundry basket, whatever it is, if it's clutter blind, and it's like, this doesn't bother me, but knowing that it stresses their spouse out, is that enough of a motivation? Even though it's personally not bothering you, if you know that it, after a long day at work or whatever it is, coming home and seeing that sink full of dishes or whatever it is really causing anxiety, is that enough of a motivation for you to make the change? And I think having those conversations is really important, because a lot of times people really can't, or it's not that they can't, but they don't necessarily have the language to articulate it. Just, they know that it makes them feel anxiety driven or makes them crazy.
Right. Exactly.
So I think again, and the other thing I see, and I don't know if you see this, is trying not to fall into that kind of martyr syndrome with families where it's like, well, I'll just do it. I'm the only one that does it. So falling into that, because that's only sustainable for so long, where everything falls on one person, and
Right.
having that division of labor, whether it's with spouses or kids or whatever, that everyone's got kind of their piece, even if there's one person that's driving the bus and saying, you're in the lead, but allowing, like, clutter and organization is a team sport, is what I always say.
Right. For sure.
Yeah. So I'm just trying to think in your, I know you talked about the Christmas sorting of toys, but are there any other, I think people just like to hear kind of behind the curtain, like what people are doing, especially as professionals, like what are you doing that works in your house? So are there any other tips or strategies that you've instituted in your house that work for you that you can share with the rest of us?
Absolutely. So one of my favorite tips is and I do this for myself as well, is if I'm sitting with a client or I'm sitting with one of my children and they're struggling with making a decision on something. So what I'll say is, you know what, let's put it aside and let's put it in a box. And we'll do that with a bunch of items. Put it in a box, seal the box, put a date on it, put the box away. And 3 months from now, I usually do 3 months. 3 months from now, take it out. And if you've never even thought about the items in there, it's time. It's gone. It needs to be donated.
So you actually like seal the box and put it away.
Put a date on it, put it away. And if you haven't thought about it, or you're like, oh, that's where that went. Or you don't even say that, like, oh, I totally forgot that I had that. Then it's time to go. Like you don't need it. Yeah.
I love it.
And that especially worked with my children when they were younger with their stuffed animals, because of course, every stuffed animal, they loved each one of them.
Oh, yes.
And so I'd say, well, let's just, you have there's a lot of children that don't have any stuffed animals. Let's just put them away and see, what happens. And like I said, 9 times out of 10, they're like, oh yeah, we can get rid of that for sure. So that's one of my favorites.
I would suspect, and I've done similar things with my kids when they were younger as well. Do you find that the next time you do it, it gets gets easier for them?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Because they remember, it depends on the age, but as they get older, they remember, oh, we're putting it in the box again. And they might not, we won't even put it in the box, because they're like, oh, if we're putting it in the box, I don't need it. I absolutely do not need it.
I love it. Okay. So, and I'm writing this down. So if anybody sees me, I'm taking notes as Lynn's talking. Cause like I said, I love to learn from my other organizers as well. So any other tips or strategies that you want to share with us?
The only other one that I would recommend is if you can't see items in your drawers or in your closets, then you really need to figure out if you need everything in there, because same with anything, refrigerator, anything that's hidden, you don't see it. So what happens is you don't see it and you don't know that you have it. So you end up buying double or triple of the same thing. I've seen that with ketchup bottles, because you have one in your fridge, one in the fridge if you have one maybe, in the basement, and then you have one in the cabinet because you can't see it. It's like buried behind everything. I unfortunately am guilty of it with shoes. I sometimes have shoes that are like hidden behind other shoes. So I buy another pair of black shoes and I'm like, oh yeah, I totally forgot I had those black shoes all the way in the back of the closet in a box, which, it's kind of fun because then it's like you got yourself a little present that you didn't know about. But at the same time, I'm like, why did I do that? Like, I don't need 2 pairs of black shoes that are very similar.
Yeah. And I think it's true, that whole out of sight, out of mind,
Yes.
and a lot of people don't like the look of clutter. They don't want to see, they don't want open cubbies or open shelving or whatever, but you have to be, and that's why I think really getting to know people is so important, because again, are you going to put it away and then forget about it? Because then you don't want that to happen, because that just is ineffective.
Right. And then I guess one more other tip would be that make sure everything has its place. So everything, as far as dishwashing soap or laundry soap, it all should be in one place. So again, you can take an inventory on what you have. Kind of goes back to out of sight, out of mind, but that as well, because then and you're not buying every time you go to the store or Costco, you're buying 2 laundry detergents because you can't find one. And then you find them all, you're like, oh, I have 5. Okay, I'm good for a while. Yeah. So that's another good tip.
We have a backup backstock pantry in our basement, because my kitchen pantry isn't that large. And so, a lot of times if we, get stuff, we keep, 1 or 2 in the pantry, and then the rest of it goes down. And I hate when I forget to check the backstock pantry, and then I buy, I'm like, oh my gosh, I already had 6 cans of black beans and now I bought more or whatever it is. So it is getting in that habit. And I think the easier that you can have one central place that you're going to look for things makes it easier than saying, I've got 10 different places, because that just takes time to go and look at 10 different places before you go. And so.
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. Okay. So Lynn, tell our listeners, and again, of course, we'll link to all this in our show notes, but just tell our listeners where they can find you, connect up with you, learn more.
Okay, great. Probably the best place to find me is on Instagram, and that is LMorganizing1. I also have my website, which is lmorganizing.com. And, feel free to reach out. That's probably the best way to find me.
And she's also on our SBO Partner page. So again, if you're like, who was that organizer? I forget. You can always head on over to us and we'll connect you up with Lynn. So lots of different places. We are going to take one more quick break. We're going to come back, and then I'm just going to put you in the hot seat for our wrap-up questions. So sit tight.
Can't wait.
All right, Lynn, thank you so much for coming on and talking about this really important topic that, again, I don't think that we could talk about it enough. Because again, it is really an ongoing thing for a lot of people, especially when you're talking about different personalities and different dynamics and people in different life cycles. So really being able to talk through different strategies and explain that, first of all, you're not alone. Because I think so many times people are in this, whatever they're in, and they're like, I feel like nobody else is going through this. And I really appreciate you kind of walking us through that. It's been super helpful. So just want to say thank you for that. Now, we ask all of our guests a few questions. So the first question is, what book has inspired you or been really transformative in your life that you can share with our listeners?
Okay, so the book that I like that has inspired me is Make Your Bed by Admiral William McRaven. I don't know, it was going around on YouTube probably maybe a year or 2 ago that he did the commencement speech in 2014 at UT. I like it because it's so simple. It's like, as he says, if you make your bed, you did one task. And even if you're having a bad day, you can come home and your bed's made by you. And what I do, and it's funny, my family makes fun of me, is that I try to make the bed every morning, but as you know, sometimes the day just gets away from you. But if the bed is not made even if I'm about ready to get into bed, I will make it. And my family's like, I don't understand that. I'm like, because then it's made and the pillows are where they need to be and I sleep better. And that's why that book just inspires me to just make your bed.
It's true. And I've been saying it. That's start with making the bed. Sets the tone for the day. Sets the tone.
Exactly.
I'm right there with you. Okay. And then of course, our last 2 wrap-up questions, because we're all about honesty, authenticity. even though you're a professional organizer, I know obviously there's many places that you are super organized and thriving, but there's probably one or two places where you feel like a little bit of a hot mess. So in this season of your life, where do you really feel like you are killing it in terms of organization? And where do you feel like maybe a little TLC?
Okay, I have to say that I feel like I'm killing it on the first floor of my house because that's where people come in.
That's awesome.
The upstairs a little bit trickier, but yeah, I feel like I know where everything is. Everything's in its place. If someone asks me where something is, 9 times out of 10, I know exactly where it is, and I can like direct them to it without any issue.
That's awesome. And so the hot mess would be the second floor. Is that where you're going to go?
Well, there's 2 things I need to work on. Yes, my closet is probably one of them. As I mentioned, I love my shoes. Each of my shoes tells a story. I have some shoes that are probably older than my daughter or how long I've been married, but because I just remember where I bought them and I remember what I was doing. Like, if I was in New York and I was in Brooklyn and I went to this cute boutique and I bought these shoes. And so that's where I'm struggle with to get rid of those shoes. But where else I really struggle is balancing between the work and managing the home, because I work from home and it's very easy to get kind of sucked into, well, I should be doing this, but there's dishes in the sink. So let me just do the dishes and then I'll do this. And then before you know it, the day is gone and I haven't accomplished anything with my business, and maybe not even, accomplish the sink. So that's where I need to really work on that and set myself up to do time blocking, which, we always recommend our clients to do, but it's hard for me to put that into my own practice. So that's what I'm going to work on.
It's a do as I say, not as I do. For a lot of
Exactly.
people, I think that, I hear that from a lot of the people that, that are in this business, that it's like, I give so much of myself to my clients and doing this, that I wind up not taking my own advice at home and with.
Exactly.
So, well, you know what? It's new year, reset, all the things. So, you know what? Tomorrow's another day. That's what we always say. So,
and make your bed.
And make your bed. Well, Lynn, thank you again for coming on our show. Thank you so much for being part of our group. I love sharing the spotlight with my partners in crime all over the country. So if you are a professional organizer or you're thinking about becoming one, you want to talk to us, shoot us a DM or email us, info@simplybeorganized. We would love to talk to you. If this is your first time tuning into our show, thank you so much for being here. Welcome. Make sure to click the subscribe button so you can get new episodes downloaded each and every week. And follow us on social, reach out, let us know what you're up to. We love hearing from you guys. Until next week, I'm Laurie Plow. Peace out. Thanks for tuning in. If you like this episode, please spread the love by sharing it with your friends. And if this is your first time tuning in, make sure to click the subscribe button wherever you are listening so that you never miss an episode. And while you're there, please leave us a review so other people know that our show is worth a listen. Head on over to YouTube and make sure that you follow us there as well. We record interviews, videos, and conversations with all of our guests. And again, if you want to learn more about our product offerings, feel free to visit us at simplybeorganized.com, where you can connect with me.